to another episode of A Fat Perspective. This is the podcast where we talk about our bodies and all the things that we may or may not want to talk about with regard to our bodies. And I'm Jen. I am a fat person, and this is told through a perspective of a fat person. And with me, I'm so excited to have Maddie Chun, and she is a journalism student who is a big supporter of body liberation.
Yeah, hi, it's so great to be here. But yeah, so I've always been fat my whole life, never been skinny. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Southern Oregon, and I think that did have a lot to do with like growing up being fat is kind of like the area I grew up being fat in. But yeah, like definitely growing up like in an outdoorsy area, like field trips were always outside doing mountainous hikes. I grew up in a valley. So that always felt very like othering as well, just like struggling to go up the mountain. And like that makes you, I just think, well, everyone was probably struggling to go up the mountain. It's like you just feel so much more in your head about it when you're fat.
I can totally sympathize with you on that because I also do a lot of outdoor stuff, but more so now as an adult because I grew up different from you. I grew up in Taiwan where outdoor culture was not the thing. You know, like people don't go outside. Like, ew, like no, because in Taiwan everyone wanted white skin. So if you want white skin, you stay inside. So when my friends invited me hiking and stuff, it was always very difficult for me because I'm bigger, so I'm slower, and I have that. I don't know if you do the same thing when you're hiking, like,
Totally.
So I do that. So I'm curious to know, has your relationship with that outdoor stuff changed now that you're an adult?
It like has and it hasn't. I think now I feel a lot more confident in just being like, I'm gonna be in the back. You can walk forward. I'll be chilling back here. I could care less if you're gonna join me. And just kind of speaking up for myself in the sense of like, I'm not going to like push myself to the brink in order to keep like the same pace as you. But yeah, I think ultimately just like having the ability to like speak up for myself more now and not feeling like bad if like someone's going to stay in the back with me, because half the time there's going to be people who aren't like up for the like quick paced hike thing anyways, like no matter what their body is like. So just kind of finding my people to walk around with in that sense has helped. But even like just little things like that when I'm walking around with like my friends and everything, I'm just like, yeah, y'all can walk ahead. Like I'm gonna enjoy the fresh air. I'm gonna enjoy my little walk. I'm not a fast walker, and that's okay.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? I think a lot of times like our self-consciousness comes from ourself. And this is with everybody, right? The things that we're like, oh my God, like it comes from more like our own perception of ourselves, because reality wise, you're like, there are other people who'd be, like you said, happy to stay in the back with you. And the other thing, so there's that one piece. And then there's another piece I think it's also important, which is like asking for what we want and meeting our needs, right? So I found like I had this great friend to hike with, like, oh my God, like she hiked with me when I was the most out of shape in terms of my cardiovascular being unable to keep up with my desire to move. And she literally was like, Jen, chill out. Doesn't matter. We'll get there eventually. So just take a break, enjoy. I'll stay with you, whatever. I just want to be outside. So it's kind of having that guiding voice and someone modeling that and then teaching me, hey, it's okay to have permission to slow down. There is no race you need to keep up with. And then having that practice for a hike and then we were also in Taiwan. So it's like in the ultra like fat shaming like context, to have that guide me through was such a powerful experience. Now I'm like, yeah, just go at what you want. Do you, and learn to listen, and honor yourself.
No, exactly. Like it's so important to listen to your body in any sense. So yeah, I feel like little things like that were kind of my first introductions to like being really aware of my body. I had a couple friends growing up who were also like fat. Like when we were really little. And I also grew up doing competitive dance and figure skating, which are also very like inherently fat phobic. I never necessarily shied away from doing those things growing up, but I definitely did always feel like very different in a lot of those spaces, especially in dance because people wear very like, I don't know if revealing is the right term, but like a lot of, like sports bras and like booty shorts and spandex and things like that. So I always was like, oh, I feel like I can't wear those things. Um, and that's the thing, like no one's saying that, it's like just a matter of like, that's how I felt. Um, in comparison to like my other friends who were dancing who were like on the skinnier side, like all of us like bigger girls, there were quite a few of us who would dance and we were bigger, but we all like wouldn't necessarily wear the exact same like practice clothes. But yeah, I think like growing up in that world was really like affecting too in a lot of ways to like kind of figuring out how to like navigate living in like a fat body in such like a skinny world, I think is a way to put it. My friend, actually my roommate who's also fat, always says that. She's like, we're just living in a skinny world.
Well, that's that's interesting, right? We're living in a skinny world. Like, in a way, it's like we're living in a skinny-centric world, like the world that was made for skinny people.
No, exactly.
I mean, like number one, it's like the infrastructure of support for different size bodies, and I think what's hard is the discrepancy in the U.S. because in the U.S. we do have a much more significant number of bigger bodies than in other countries. Like I understand if Taiwan doesn't have like here's size inclusivity because out of like what are you, like a 1% of the population? You know what I mean? So okay, like it sucks. It really sucks. And I understand like the logic behind it. But in a place like the US where like what is the statistic of like it like it's quite a bit of females. Like I feel like I've seen quotes like, oh, over 50% of female are above a size 16. And I don't know how accurate those statistics are, but it's like quite a significant, because when you look outside, not everyone looks like not everyone is a size 16, but there's a quite a much bigger population. So you'd think there'd be more inclusivity, but it's like the population is bigger than this infrastructure to catch up.
Yeah, and it's just the idea of like, I feel like the less we keep like basically not refusing to normalize like bigger bodies and bigger sizes and things like that, it just furthers kind of like almost like the industry of being skinny.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I've been thinking about how normalized like gym subscriptions have become, especially being from the West Coast. But yeah, I think like just like the gym subscription and also just like the pressure to go to the gym like every single day. I think there was a study I saw saying something that like whether you go 7 days a week, 5 days a week, or 3 days a week, it doesn't necessarily make that big of a difference on like your long-term health.
Yeah, I think the thing I like that what you brought up, which is the industry of being skinny. There is an industry that tells us we need to look a certain way, dress a certain way, and behave a certain way, and it makes sense because they make money telling us to do that.
Yeah.
And the people who argue that, like listen, it changes all the time. Like that industry changes all the time, and the thing that drives me the most crazy, like the biggest effect it had on women, well, no, that's not true. That's not true. One of the biggest cultural, because you can't, like, one of the most interesting cultural phenomenons it had on women was actually the razor. Like, we did not regularly remove body hair until Mr. Gillette, and it was Mr. Gillette, and I forget his first name. I don't care to know his first name. He decided he wanted to sell more razors. So he was like, let's market, women without like broad body hair so we can sell more razors. And that is precisely where our like, no armpit hair, no leg hair stuff came from.
Yes, I know someone in one of my classes right now who is working on a story about the evolution of like basically how like yeah, body hair removal brands, I guess, have marketed to women and things like that and really like controlled kind of the narrative on those types of things. And it's crazy. I mean, I honestly don't shave anymore. I feel like that's very like lesbian of me. A lot of lesbians don't shave anymore, I think. But like my girlfriend still shaves because like she's just like that's just how I prefer it now. Like she's just like I'm just so used to it, which is like super valid. But I've had so many times like even before I feel like I was really committed to not shaving, where like I would, you know, let my armpit hair grow out really far and then like my mom would see it and be like, Maddie, like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And I was like, Mom, you just need to mind your own business. It's okay.
You know what? What's interesting that you brought up is like that's her preference, right? And I often think about where our preferences come from, and are they really our preferences?
Yeah. No, and that's like, I mean, I think that can go deep into like everything. I wrote this article, as you know, about like kind of how I think being plus size really affected my kind of, I don't even know if coming out is the right term, but just my like realization that I was a lesbian so inherently. And I don't know if all like fat lesbians would feel that way or anything like that, but like I really think it affected it so much because I think I think most women's like self-worth is supposed to be like by societal standards based off of like how many men she attracts. Um but I think when you're fat, it just means so much more. Like any rejection you get is going to be based off of like not even like your nose or whatever, you know, body part. It's like the fact that you are fat.
Well, it's like it's there's like I mean you're touching on so many different levels, right? Like external approval, like that we all like humans we live for that, right? Acceptance, which is one of the core human needs, is to be accepted as part of a group because like bad being banished and being outed from like a group who used to be like a punishment worse than death according to Shakespeare, you know, banished that, right? Like so we're social creatures, so the idea to fit in and belong, like that's important. And then there's a whole like am I liking things I like because I like them or because I was told I need to like them. So there's all these
Yeah.
different things, and then add on to that, there's your whole like, there's our like I share the same things too. Our whole like well, my body size like gives me demerit points.
It does. Like it's truly like I mean, I think it's really to the point where like fat people are like devalued.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see it statistically. Like I think statistically fat people often get paid less. Um we have to pay more for clothing, the fat tax. Like there's all sorts of things like
Oh my
that.
god, we get both, Maddie. We get the fat and pink tax.
Yes, we do. Woo!
Go us. Boo.
Yeah, it's you know, it's really just like a never-ending cycle. Or like, I mean, medical fat phobia, of course, is like very rampant. And I
Oh my
remember,
god. Why don't can you speak a little bit about more about medical fat phobia, just so people that's just like that like give people some information like what we're talking about, because they might
yeah,
be like we disagree with you, you're just two fat chicks talking about how your life sucks, right? Well, actually there's a thing.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think like generally across the board, medical fat phobia is kind of just this sense that like any ailment you have, any illness, any discomfort is going to be is going to be like blamed on your fatness by doctors. Things that like seemingly have nothing to do with that are instantly blamed on being fat. So my favorite example of this one is that freshman year of college, I had the craziest case of bronchitis. Like I was hacking it up for probably like 5 months. Like professors stopped classes concerned about me. My boss was like buying me all this like
I'm
medicine.
I'm really glad this didn't happen to you like COVID era.
Well, so it actually did.
No!
I, I was a freshman during like this. I started getting sick
Oh my
January
god,
of
Maddie, no.
it was definitely bad timing. But during that time, I went to many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And I went to an urgent care doctor by my campus. I go to Emerson College, by the way. And I was looking back one day at his like report that he wrote, and he literally wrote in it like suggest I'm going to suggest losing weight to get rid of this cough. I was like, I'm sorry. That was so whack. Like I'm just like, there's no way you're gonna blame my like aggressive bronchitis on my weight. Like that's just insane.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, people, and I will not say that there is like that being fat doesn't have an impact on our bodies. It most
Yeah,
certainly does. We are
totally.
not. I am not saying that a fat body is inherently healthy, nor is it inherently unhealthy. Like, I am not, and because like, listen, I have fatty liver, y'all. Okay, like, it's because I'm fat. Okay, like, I'm not here going, yay, being like fat is super healthy. I am not saying that. You're not saying that. What we're saying is like, it is not the aspirin. It is not the end all be all diagnosis. Like, it's just so ridiculous. And like, health shaming is
Yeah.
such a thing. And let me know if I'm like cutting you off too much. Cause like, I recently like had an article out on HuffPost, and instead of calling me ugly, which a few people did, and I read the comment section, which I shouldn't do, but I was like, let me just eat their hate like medicine, and because I was like, what the hell? And then overall, everyone was health shaming me. Like, I'm promoting like bad behavior, like it's all, or like it's stuff like, it's all well and fine that she's anti-shame, but shouldn't she be healthy? And I was like, do you know that I'm not? Do you know what I mean? And do you know that you are? Like, that's the thing, right? Like, yes, and being fatter puts you at higher risk for a lot of things. So what? Anyway.
No, it's crazy. It's also like just because it puts me at higher risk for things doesn't mean I need to necessarily change anything about it. Like, I don't know, maybe that's a little off base for me to just say, but it's like that's just a reality. Like, and I think protecting your mental health is often just as important as protecting like your physical health.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I've thought about this a lot and I've seen this happen to my friends that the minute they lose like the weight, capital T, capital W, it's it's like,
The weight.
yeah, like suddenly everyone loves them. They have like a
Yeah.
amazing love life. Everyone,
Yeah.
like, I live on a very small campus. I've seen it happen to my friends. Like they lose weight and they instantly become like a well-known
Oh,
person on campus.
let me tell you something. Same thing with me. Like, literally, like in college. This was a long time ago. I'm older than you. The same guy, when I was fat, paid me no mind. Moment I lost weight, oh, you're so hot, Jen. Yes, and I'm like, and I dated him because I like liked him. But then I was like, oh my god, I'm supporting fat phobia.
Yeah, and it's like, of course you wanted to be with him. Like that was like, it's just like it's so, and that's one of those things like I know I don't want to lose the weight
The
because I
weight.
don't want to go through that. I don't need that in my life. I don't want everyone commenting on my weight. Like I think
Oh my god.
like, oh, you lost weight, oh, you look so good. Like absolutely not. You
Maddie,
can miss me with
people,
that
you
shit.
can teach people in your life to not comment. Let me tell you something. I
Yeah.
have recently lost a significant amount of weight. So freaking what? And people in my life in the States, in Taiwan, blah, 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 blah. It's like ingrained. People in my life in the States have not said a single goddamn thing. Because they know. They know. I don't want to talk about it. My body's not up for discussion. They know. It's a clear understanding. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. So you can teach your community to do that. Absolutely, you can. And they
Yeah.
will zip it about your body changes.
Yeah. No, I've definitely had many conversations like with my mom about it. I think my mom is like fat now, but she like grew up skinny. And I think that's a very interesting thing. I don't know if I'm the person to talk about that because that's not my experience, but I do think it's a very like interesting headspace to be in about your weight. I think my mom is definitely not like the worst case I've like witnessed.
Yeah.
She understands where I am about it and like respects that. And like I've told her, I'm like, Mom, like I just cannot talk about this with you. We have very differing beliefs on this. And like I'm not doing that. And like we're not going to talk about this. But obviously when I was like living under her roof, that was much harder.
It's always harder with parents. And let me tell you something, Maddie. I don't take it like, it's also hard for me. And I've been in therapy for this for a decade. I know. Like I moved back to Taiwan, and it's like a fat phobic environment inherently. Like people hate fatness there, and I will challenge anyone. This is a hill I will die on because I know I'm right. But
Yes,
like,
you are.
but being there 6 months later, like it was just so hard to be kind to myself.
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you, like, it's okay. It's always going to be hard with these strong ingrained conversations.
No, exactly. And like, and it's one of those things where like that's a hurdle they kind of need to get through. And like me trying to explain to them how I feel about it is only going to help that. But like when my mom did read like the article I wrote about like being fat and like growing up fat and then like being a lesbian and things, it was all intertwined. She like texted me and she was like, I'm so sorry that like I contributed to this. And I think that was really a beautiful moment to have with my
See,
mother.
it's wonderful. Like when you share your stories and when people listen and see you, that's when conversations change. That is how
Exactly.
we're going to shift our paradigm about
Yeah.
our internalized shaming of diverse bodies. I don't even want to call it fat phobia. It's like diverse bodies.
Yeah.
If you're not the ideal, you get shamed at some point. You have
Yeah.
one leg, not two, you get shamed. You know,
Yeah.
like, so sharing your story is what's going to, open hearts and change perspectives. So, I know we just kind of touched the surface of your coming out story. I would love for you to just I mean, if you're comfortable, to share more, kind of like more like what your journey was like, what were like some of like the key moments that like helped you on your discovery, and like want to know more about it.
I remember like in eighth grade kind of having this realization of like, okay, yes, I am bisexual. That's like what I thought at the time. And then kind of just like knowing that, but like keeping it to myself. Like I think I told a couple of my friends, mostly my friends who did theater over like other friends. And then my senior year of high school, I was super depressed. And I think I felt like coming out would like cure that depression, even though I was not depressed about being in the closet. Like that was definitely not the root of my depression. That was like, oh, this will make me feel happy. And I told a couple friends, I told a couple people in my life that I was bi, and it definitely like, I felt like 30 minutes of like happiness, but I was actually just depressed about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then
Oh
I,
my gosh, I'm gonna jump in and interrupt you for a second
yeah,
because I think that what you just shared is like a key thing. Like the stuff that's behind everything, we need to address eventually.
yeah. So I thought, coming out would like cure my depression. It didn't. I also didn't come out in like some big way. I don't really think that's like quite my style, if you could say. I kind of was always in this mindset of like, I'll tell everyone like when it comes up was always my thing. Then I moved to Boston for college. I go to one of the gayest schools in America. It's like ranked as one of the most LGBT friendly, which is just buzzwords for the gayest. And I remember I was telling my mom that this was obviously before I was out. My mom goes, well, do you think you're going to be able to like date there? Like, is that going to be hard? And I was like, oh no, it'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. But obviously I wasn't worried about it because I was like, well, it doesn't matter. So whatever, I go there. I mostly pursued men for like the first semester I was at school, but that was mostly because I was still like obviously uncomfortable. I wasn't totally sure of like the exact kind of like bounds, I guess, of my sexuality. And also at the end of the day, I was still just seeking approval from men. And then my friends and I, this is crazy. My friends and I started this thing that we called the shoot your shot challenge. And basically we all had to like make a move on someone by Valentine's Day, and whoever was like the most successful was going to get to go to Build a Bear and get a bear for free. This is an insane story.
That's the funniest thing I've heard. Like, I mean, the prize being Build a Bear, like that's the cherry on like.
Yeah, there's something so it was very silly. And that was kind of the first like woman I pursued. We're not together anymore, but anyways, so that like kind of going through that really opened like my whole world. I was like, holy shit, mind blown, like this is everything. And I think that's what really made me be like, oh my gosh, I definitely think I'm a lesbian. At this point, I've told everyone in my life, like, obviously, I'm like, was dating a girl at the time, things like that. And then I remember, like, a year later, I just actually had sex with a woman for the first time. And I was like, I was like, whoa, mind blown. That was dope. And then I was like, okay, but you know what? Like, let me just go on Tinder, like put men back on my Tinder, just swipe through and just like see how I feel. I felt like I did it. And I remember I felt like physically ill. I was like,
Oh.
absolutely not. This is disgusting. And that's when I was like, yes, I'm a lesbian. So ever since then, you know, I'm very out and proud. I stay chatting about lesbianism. And yeah, so
So how
that
did
was
the
kind of,
I'm sorry, and because I remember the point of your article was also like how your body stuff got in the way.
yeah, I think the main way like my body stuff got in the way was like one, being fat. I was like insecure about, you know, being naked. And I think obviously most people are insecure about being naked, but I think when you're fat, there's obviously added things to that. So I like didn't have sex with a woman for a very long time because of that too. I mean, there is a lot of fat phobia in the queer community for sure. I do think sometimes like wanting to present more like queer or lesbian can be a little bit harder just because a lot of like queer fashion tends to be like not the most accessible to bigger people. But I have also noticed that a lot of like fat influencers are lesbians. Um, but I think it's very rampant, I think, in like the gay, like the male gay, like cis het community. Like I would say it's like super prevalent to be
I
honest.
mean, here's the thing though, like, but like, here's a theory that's based on nothing but my thoughts. So it is my opinion. So it could be wrong, right? Like, is it because they're men? Like
It
like the
probably is.
patriarchy, like this is they've been taught to desire women in a certain way. And I'm not saying that they but will like desire their property or their partner to be da 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 da. So then it's like no matter my sexuality or my preference, I want my partner to be like that which I've been taught as a man I want. And
Yeah,
again, I could be spouting garbage, right? I'm just thinking about the system, the
yeah,
structure that we all grew up in general. Not and I could be wrong, but and then for women, we're taught to be the prize, right? So when we're seeking, we may not always seek the prize because it's like we're like more like, oh, we need to be the prize. We need to be the prize. And I'm talking like very binary, even though like
yeah.
I know that the world is non-binary. You know, we're talking the binary roles, like this kind of what they teach you.
No, totally. And I do think that's like a pretty decent, like educated guess just based off of like the things you know what I mean? Like I think, you know, that like fat phobia in like the male like cishet gay community can't really necessarily be like that pinpointed because I think there's so many things. But I do think one of the things is definitely status based. I think there can definitely be a lot of like that energy. I remember one of my best friends from high school, he actually is gay. He moved to LA and has a boyfriend there. They've been there for a couple years. And like, I remember I went to visit them and they were like house hunting, like they were looking for an apartment. And they
Yeah.
were like, but we have to have stainless steel appliances. And you know, I live over here in Boston, like nothing's new. And I was like, why though? That makes no sense. Like that's so stupid. And he was like, Maddie, if we don't have stainless steel appliances, like the gays of WeHo are gonna eat us alive. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like that's crazy.
Well,
So
it's
I do
also
think,
LA. So a couple,
yeah,
I had a couple other questions for you. One, because the reason why we connected was you actually reached out to me when you were researching about people who are very passionate about like fat liberation. Blah. And so like I was curious, like what issues, like what really, like if I were to say, okay, Maddie, rant, go. What are some fat related issues or topics that you could just like talk forever on?
who I think
Go, rant,
definitely.
rant, rant. This is your permission to
Yes,
rant.
I
Go.
think, sorry, I'm not a natural ranter. I think biggest thing is definitely almost like now that like kind of the body positivity movement is alive, how do we make that more inclusive or replace it with body liberation would probably be my preference. I think, you know, body positivity only goes so far. And I think it's just not, it's not the most inclusive. And I think
Can you
it's still
explain
kind of,
why?
yeah, I guess I just think it tends to center you know, like pretty people at the end of the day. Like I think a lot of body positivity movements and the people who like become the face of those movements are people who don't always look like everyone. You know, I don't know. I don't know if that's like the right way to put it, but I think there's still just, and I think this goes hand in hand with like anti-fatness, but like people just hate ugly people. And I'm like, damn, like everyone can just live their lives. Like I don't think anyone, I think labeling people as like ugly and pretty is like really stupid. And
I
I
guess,
think
yeah,
it's just like, ugh, it just gives me the ick.
it's about beautiful, right? We're like, oh, fat is beautiful. How about we don't give two craps about that?
Exactly.
That's
Yeah. It's
yeah,
like,
like, and then like it's like, oh, you're beautiful. I'm like, who cares? You know,
exactly.
and I know I wrote that in the HuffPost article because it was like coming to terms with like my whole point, which I think got like the whatever, but it was just like, and I didn't get to it, which is like beauty is literally it is what you decide. Like you can
Yeah.
find beauty in anything if you slow down and look at it. So
No, that's a much better way to say the point that I was trying to get to. Definitely much more precise. I think the other thing that I'm really concerned about right now is, and we were talking about this when I interviewed you for the piece that we like met through, was there is like heroin chic is coming back.
I
Have
saw
you
that.
heard about
Why?
this?
Why?
I think
Who?
it's because I think it's a mix of like indie sleaze also coming back, which is like kind of the 2013 like Tumblr-ish era. I like saw people like talking about, you know, different shows from like the fashion weeks this year and how we like took steps back in like the body inclusivity in those shows.
Mm.
And once again, I really think fashion shows like no one actually wears those clothes. But at the
Well,
end of the day, they're still setting the tone.
well, the thing about the fashion industry, which I talked to my friend about, it's all about gatekeeping. They love to gatekeep because the more they gatekeep, like the more exclusive something is, the harder it is to get, drives up price, blah 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 blah, makes you want to desire the brand, and then so it's like they have this difficult thing where it's like we're asking for inclusivity, and they're like, no,
Yeah. And it's like,
no, we've always gate kept, you know.
yeah, and it's so that is like definitely been on my mind recently, especially Emerson is a very like fashion forward school. There's not a lot of like the typical college like leggings and sweatshirt garb. So I've noticed like some very concerning ish like, you know, things that way for me, like fashion trends. But yeah, heroin chic coming back is a big concern of mine. I'm like, oh no, we don't need to go back to this. It's like really bad. Even Kate Moss has said it was bad, I
It
think.
is
Like,
bad. It is
so
bad. The idea that we termed it heroin chic, drug addict couture, like,
yeah,
and that's healthy. Oh, there's so many
yeah,
things, but like,
it's so bad. Uh,
no. So the one thing I always like to end every show in, like I keep repeating this, and I said this earlier, and I think it's so important, is we, in order to change this conversation that we have about ourselves and our bodies, I think the best way to go about it is by sharing stories. Because I've believed this ever since I read Anne Frank's diary in 8th grade. Like, if we really get to hear another person's voice and see who they truly are, like, how are we not affected? So, in the interest of that, I would love for you to share a story about like, yourself and kind of like the moment or a moment or moments where you really like your relationship with your body changed for the better.
yeah, I think I have a hard time. I have a terrible memory.
Sure.
I think this was a big step for me was my senior year of high school. I was like applying to colleges, and Emerson asked like their question is like, if you could title the story of your life, like what would it be? And I think my title was something along the lines of like, I'm a fat queen. And I think basically what it was about though was that while I'm fat, I don't let that narrative control like my personality and who I am. I'm still very loud. I'm still very outgoing. I'm still going to like state my opinion. I'm not going to make myself quieter because of that. And I think that is one of the like largest narratives of fat people is that they're like shy and they don't talk and they like stay to themselves, especially in like the high school, stories like that we like writing that was it was only like a paragraph or two, but that was a really big deal for me was just putting that to paper and almost like writing out like, yes, I am fat and that's okay. And I think that was one of the first times that like I really was like, I'm fat, I'm gonna let people read about it, and that's okay.
It's like what I'm hearing you say, and like let me know if I like, misread it, which is like part of it is like owning it as part of your identity without shame.
Yeah, totally.
This is me. I'm fat. And there is nothing wrong with that word. It is a neutral word.
Exactly. And like there's nothing wrong with like a fat person who is quiet.
No.
But that's not me. And I don't need to be that way because I'm fat. So I think that was really, yeah, like literally writing that and then like facing my college counselor, like kind of giving me like, whatever copy editing it or whatever it was, like, and being like, oh my gosh, I just wrote this thing. I remember being very scared, but being like, this was really good.
This is great. So it's like your voice was heard and it's like your permission was granted.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't need to hide that I'm fat.
But beyond that, it's your power is now in your hands.
Exactly.
It's not in them go, oh, you're fat. No, it's just like, I'm fat and I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. So happy. Like that happened for you.
Yeah, no, it was definitely big. I just thought of that like when you asked that question, I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to say. And then I was like, oh, right. Yeah, I think that was pretty big for me.
I love that you called yourself a fat queen too. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I was basically just like, yeah, like I'm fat and I was the president of student council. Like,
yes.
Like just silly things like that, but pretty big for my high school self, I think.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing. And thank you so much for spending time with me today and with everybody. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Oh, I was so excited when you asked me. I was like, ooh, this is so exciting.
Yeah, right. And just a reminder for everyone listening, please pop over to afatperspective.com. That's where all the podcasts will be held. And then also there is a contact me form. And I'd love to hear from you. Your stories, what you want to share. Like it is a place where, again, stories save lives. So please come by and share.